Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar. I'm Daita Sergi, Education Programs Manager with HEASC, and I'll be the moderator today. I'm also a liaison to the Higher Education Association Sustainability Consortium, HEASC, and the Disciplinary Associations Network for Sustainability, or short DANCE, and I'll be introducing also today's presenters. As many of you know, HEASC's mission is to inspire and catalyze higher education to lead the global sustainability transformation. We are an international association with about 1,000 members spread across more than 20 countries, including Canada, Colombia, and Turkey. We serve as the professional home for campus sustainability staff, but we offer resources for everyone in higher education. We provide an expansive collection of online resources, networking tools, and educational events such as today's webinar, as well as an annual conference and expo, which will take place this year online from October 20th to the 22nd. We recognize that the global pandemic we're experiencing is creating intense challenges for most everyone, including those of us supporting sustainability in higher education. By going virtual, we have the opportunity to expand our engagement to campuses and organizations throughout the world with a much smaller footprint. This transition also enables us to more fully enact our values and expand the breadth and depth of our education offerings. I hope you will join us in October for the virtual conference. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Everyone in the audience is on mute, but please feel free to ask questions or provide comments at any point during the presentation. You can do that by typing your questions or comments in the questions pane in the GoToWebinar control panel. If you have additional questions, please email them to education@hesc.org. At the end of the webinar, you'll have the opportunity to provide feedback regarding today's presentation. We take your suggestions into account when planning for future webinars, so please do provide this feedback. Also, please note this webinar is being recorded. If you experience technical difficulties or have to leave early, you and others can view the recording later together with the presentation materials, which will all be uploaded into the Sustainability Hub after the live broadcast. Before I go into today's webinar, I want to provide a bit more background, and sorry about my slides not moving the way I wanted them to move, but I want to provide a bit more background regarding HEASC, a network of 13 higher education associations with a commitment to advancing sustainability within their constituents and also throughout higher education. These organizations share a commitment to collaboration within their field and also within higher education more broadly. And they are professional association for college and universities presidents, chief academic officers, business officers, facilities directors, auxiliary officers, student affairs, recreation staff, housing officers, procurement officers, and sustainability leaders. And HEASC serves as the coordinating body for HEASC. At this time, I'd like to introduce today's presenters. So let's see if my slides keep jumping again. So Deborah Rowe, Ranira O'Donnell, Ilma Stankevičiūtė, Van Sullivan, and Joanna Anderson. Dr. Rowe is the president of the U.S. Partnership for Education for Sustainable Development and also a co-founder and director of HEASC. She helps higher education faculty and staff, as well as K-12 associations and other private and public institutions integrate sustainability into missions, curricula and training, research policy, culture, and community partnerships. Ranira works with universities and higher education institutions as part of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's learning team. Her work focuses on growing the Foundation's university network and leveraging the value of taking a whole campus approach across teaching, research, student-led activities, and campus management to support the transition to a circular economy. Ilma is also part of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's learning team and focuses on creating digital business-oriented circular economy content, as well as designing face-to-face learning experiences for circular economy professionals. Van serves as the Chief Operating Officer of the not-for-profit organization which provides auxiliary services to enhance campus life for Stony Brook students and faculty. And Joanna works with SPLC members to develop and implement strategic sustainable purchasing programs designed to create a more sustainable world, and also collaborates on the development of resources to support members in achieving their goals. So more information about the presenters is found on the HE website under the webinar listing. It is my pleasure to welcome all attendees and thank you for joining us today. At this time, I would like to turn to Deborah to take it away.
Thank you. Nope. So next slide. Do you have my slides, Daita?
Yes, and I apologize for why they disappeared.
While she finds them, I'll go ahead. So what we wanted to do was just tell you that HEASC isn't just for the professional associations, that we're really there for all of you. All of these associations in HEASC, plus we have 45 academic disciplinary associations in DANS, the Disciplinary Associations Network for Sustainability. And those are the professional associations where faculty go in each of their different academic areas, you know, chemistry, psychology, etc. We're all here to help you on campus by compiling resources, creating resources, compiling resources, and sharing them with you. So please do check out the resources that we have at HEASC and DANS. And if you have other people on your campus who aren't aware yet that these professional associations have support materials to help you bring sustainability alive on your campuses, in your communities, and in the broader society, then you can let them know about that so that they can use it. Next slide. So we want to give you just a taste. We know that many of you have been dealing with the COVID issues. So we have a sustainability primer for presidents, trustees, and staff. And that's a really, I've had presidents and provosts who've read it and other senior leaders and said, whoa, you know, we're doing a lot with sustainability, but I didn't realize I could be doing this, or we forgot about this part. Beyond Doom and Gloom is an initiative we created 4 years ago to engage students in solutions to climate change instead of just dooming and glooming them with these facts. We have a policy partner network that is in 35 states now. It is free for you to join. And the idea is to connect you with policies that are changing, particularly at the state level, and are making a real difference as to whether we'll have a sustainable future or not. Students can engage in that policies, they can practice the skills of democracy, and they feel a lot better, much less doom and gloom when they're engaged in these solutions. So please check out that initiative. Also, if you haven't yet institutionalized sustainability by putting it into job descriptions and performance appraisals across the college or university, we have a call to action that helps you do that. So we have all sorts of resources for you. That's just a taste. And you can also apply to be a HEASC or DANS fellow, where you give us just a small number of hours each week, but you're working on national and even international initiatives. We do work with the United Nations Environment Program and other agencies on growing green jobs internationally and much more, but this just gives you a taste. Next slide. So one of our members at HEASC is the International Institute for Sustainable Laboratories. And we know that there have been some serious issues around shutting down and then reopening labs during this COVID-19 crisis. So we wanted to make sure that it's just an example, but we wanted to make sure you saw this example because there can be some pretty toxic chemicals that can be dangerous when you, or materials. Biomaterials, so you got to make sure that you're closing these labs and reopening them. Next slide. And there's a bunch of links on this next slide where you can access those resources. That's just from the lab part, but remember we've got faculty, facilities directors, and we've got business officers, all that list that Daita gave you. And that's in addition to the wonderful HE Hub with its 11,000 plus resources. And so now I think we're ready to go to our first speaker. I'm so pleased that they are all here today to help us learn about the circular economy. So Rhaenyra, it's all yours.
Hello, hi, I'm trying to work out if you can actually see my screen, and I think you can. There we go. Hi, Ilma and I am really pleased to be here today to share with you our work at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and some insights into circular procurement. We'll briefly cover who we are, how we define circular economy, why the higher education sector is so important in the transition to a circular economy, and then head into circular procurement and the relevance to the sector. So for anyone who doesn't know who we are, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation was set up 10 years ago by Dame Ellen MacArthur, who's a sailor. You can look up her story online. And we have a single mission, and our mission is to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. We are completely about systemic change and generally work across three key pillars of governments and institutions, industry and business, and academia, recognizing the key role that each of these sectors has in the move towards a circular economy. So, what is the circular economy? I'm going to start by telling you a story, and I'm going to tell you a story about light bulbs. So take yourself back to December 1923. It is close to Christmas. You're in Geneva in Switzerland. There are Christmas lights strung up everywhere. And in a meeting room, you have the heads of all the light bulb manufacturers in the world. So you've got Mr. Osram, Mr. Philips, Mr. General Electric, and all the others who came together to hold a meeting. And they came together because they had a problem. They had a problem. They were not selling enough light bulbs. The lifespan of light bulbs at that point had increased so that they were causing low sales as they were not burning out. And so during the meeting, it was decided that all manufacturers would limit lamp life to a 1,000-hour standard. Members would test each other's bulbs and fines could be imposed for bulbs that lasted longer than the agreed 1,000 hours. And the Phoebus, so this was called the Phoebus Cartel, and it was born on that evening, and it was one of the earliest examples that we have of planned obsolescence. Just to put that into perspective, the average light bulb in the 1920s lasted twice as long as 1,000 hours. And there's a light bulb in a fire station in Livermore in the US that has been burning almost continuously since 1901. In 2015, it surpassed 1 million hours in service. We think the story epitomizes the transaction-based economy, the economy that depends on an ever-increasing pattern of consumption, leading to ever-increasing draw on natural resources. And it highlights the powerful role of design in an economy for both good and for bad. It is a really good example of an economy that takes natural resources, it makes stuff with them, and ultimately it wastes them. And this is the predominant model of today's economy. And we know that it isn't sustainable in the long term. So I guess the question is, where do we go from here? So we're currently running a series of webinars, one of which is for teenagers. It's a global series, and we've got teenagers from all over the world. And we held a session on the linear economy and asked them at the end of that to describe what a solution to the linear economy could look like. And we had one student who wrote back to say that a different or new economy should be based on a thoughtful take, a meaningful make, and a wise waste. We thought that was such great insight from a young student and a really great way to describe how a new economy could work. So the circular economy is a concept inspired by nature. This gives rise to a new way of looking at the economy. Instead of a machine, it's like a forest. In nature, there is no waste. Waste is always food for something else. In seeking to mimic nature, our view is the circular economy is made up of three core principles. The first one of these is about designing out waste and pollution. So we need to start thinking of waste as a design flaw rather than just an end product. By shifting our mindsets in this way, we can ensure that when products and services are designed, that waste and pollution are not created in the first place. The second core principle of the circular economy is about keeping materials in use. So we can't keep wasting resources. So while we can design some products so they can be reused, repaired, or remanufactured, making things last forever is not the only solution. For many products and materials, we need to know where they end up in the market, and we need to be able to get them back so we can keep them out of landfill and keep those resources in use. The third part of the circular economy is about regenerating natural systems. As I've just said, in nature, there's no concept of waste. Everything becomes food for something else. And instead of doing less harm, we should be aiming to do more good. So by thinking on how we can return valuable nutrients to the soil and other ecosystems, we can enhance our natural resources. And these three principles need to be underpinned by renewable energy production and use. So at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, these are the three principles that we set out in how we describe the circular economy. They are the foundation for a system that can work in the long term, and a system that we call, obviously, the circular economy. It's about designing out waste and pollution, keeping those products in use, and regenerating natural systems. And these can all be implemented using a number of different strategies, such as reuse, repair, remanufacture, products as a service, regenerative agriculture practices, and more, entirely dependent on the context in which you would want to be able to implement them. Shifting to this new system brings multiple benefits for all concerned, not least the economic benefits, which if you haven't had a look at our one of our early reports, we set out the economic benefits of a circular economy, and I would recommend that you dig that out and have a look at it. I'm not sure if anyone's seen this diagram before, but we use it a lot. It's called, unsurprisingly, the butterfly diagram. So down the middle, what you see is a traditional linear trajectory for product development and use. And on either side, we demonstrate the circular alternatives. The image highlights a number of value creation opportunities. On the one side, we have the biological flows, and on the other side, we have the technical flows. And by separating materials into biological and technical flows, we are able to show how value can be created in a number of different ways. On the biological side, it allows for non-toxic materials to be separated, reused effectively, and returned as nutrients to the soil when appropriate. You can see on the image where there's anaerobic digestion. So for example, in your higher education campuses, do you collect your food waste? Does it go to an anaerobic digester? Could you produce biogas? Or could you get those nutrients back into the soil as fertilizers, potentially in campus food growing areas, and that food can then go back into servicing your canteens. And there are lots of examples where some great work is being done in this area. On the technical side of the diagram, greater value is gained for innovating in the inner loops, where a higher percentage of the original embedded value in terms of labor and energy is retained. I mean, one of the misconceptions that we get quite a lot at the foundation is, oh, isn't the circular economy all just about more recycling? And as you'll see, recycling is absolutely part of this conversation, but it is on the very, very outer loop. And I guess our view is that there are a lot of other methods and business models that you can put in place, and recycling should really be one of last resort. And this diagram shows how products can be designed to be more durable, easier to repair, and upgradable so that they can stay in circulation and cycle through the different loops for longer. It's really important to notice for this that emphasis is placed on the inner loops. The smaller the loop, the more circular the approach. I'm not going to go into any further detail about this, but there are multiple case studies that we have on our website that show how different companies have implemented different parts of this diagram to make their businesses more circular. So if changing a system means doing things differently, what does different look like? I'm going to take us back to our light bulb story. This is one of my favorite ones. So Philips, they were at that meeting in 1923, and they were one of the ones who said, let's limit the life of our light bulbs. If we fast forward almost 100 years, we're seeing something very, very different. So what if instead of buying light bulbs, you could just buy light? And this is exactly the model that Philips have come up with. So the National Union of Students building in London is it was a refurbished building, and as part of their refurbishment, they decided that they were not going to buy light, and they approached Philips under this new pay-per-lux model. And Philips provide light as a service. So they're responsible for all the maintenance upgrades, all the disposal, and because they retain ownership of the materials, they recover them at the end of their life, recycle them into new products. It also lowers their costs because they don't have to have as much in terms of raw materials, and it incentivizes the design of better and more durable products. Obviously, they want their products out there to last as long as possible so that they don't have to repair them. And the customer wins because they get a hassle-free access to light and only pay for what they use. This building is not the only place that's buying light. The Washington Metro, RAU Architects, and Schiphol Airport all rent light under this model. And for me, this is such a great example of how a traditional linear product has been turned into a really great alternative circular model. So in thinking about why circular economy is really important for higher education, that's why we are here today, As I've said before, transitioning to a circular economy requires a systems change, and higher education is absolutely a key part of the system. So as long with cities and governments and industry, academia really does play a key role within the transition. Over the past 10 years, we've worked with universities to develop their capacity to teach future generations and retrain the current workforce, as well as bringing higher education businesses and together to knowledge share, so applied research can support the business transition to a more circular economy. But the sector, as you know, is more than just about teaching and research. So at the foundation and in our higher education program, we've identified 5 drivers or levers and ways in which the sector can really support this transition. So the first one, as I mentioned, is teaching. Future leaders, young professionals gain circular economy insights, skills, capabilities, which they can take forward. Really interestingly, from 2018 to 2019, we saw a doubling of courses either dedicated to the circular economy or with circular economy elements just in the US alone. It is it's a large growing area of academia, and we're really, really excited by the number of universities that are now taking on circular economy as either core modules or as part of another course. It's a really exciting area for us. The second driver and lever, which I've already also mentioned, is about research. Universities are engines for innovation, and applied research really can provide those critical insights and knowledge required to initiate industry and policy shifts. Many collaborative projects have developed as a result of us bringing together universities and our business community. In fact, Ilma will be talking to you in a bit around the collaboration that led exactly to what we're sharing with you in this workshop today. A third area that we're seeing a lot of activity in and where there is scope for a lot of support for the circular economy is in student-led activities. So initiatives which drive circular solutions through student investment, application, and exploration of the topic. I think a really great example earlier this year of this was the Harvard Circular Economy Symposium, which was held in early March. This was put on almost entirely by students and led by students. A really great example of students taking the concept and the topics by the horns and really leading with it. We're also seeing the rise of the post-plan for action network in the US and in the UK and in wider Europe, the Circular Economy Club. Again, all groups and networks which have been facilitated and led by students. Another area that we see that's really important is the role that universities play in being local leaders and local influencers of change and change hubs. And we'll be sharing later on some examples of how higher education has and is working with their localities to trial and implement more circular approaches. So the last bit I'm going to kind of focus on a bit more, because I think that's where we segue into the world of procurement, but it's really about campus management. So universities can act as lighthouse demonstrators of circular economy practices across their estate operations and as local leaders. How you use your purchasing power will enable the transition to a more circular economy. If the higher education sector in the US was a country, it would be the 22nd largest global economy. That's pretty powerful. I mean, I had a conversation with a US university earlier this year who told me that they spend $1 billion annually on goods and services, and that doesn't even include their capital spend. In the UK, our university sector spends approximately £3.5 billion annually on capital expenditure. And in 2012, the University of Nottingham here in the UK really recognised the power that the higher education sector has in terms of using their spend, and challenged the sector to channel £1 billion worth of spend towards social enterprise. Our challenge now is, how do we divert that spend to become more circular and to deliver more circular approaches and solutions? Now, before I hand over to Ilma, it would be completely remiss of me not to mention the state of the world at present and to think about the impact COVID-19 is having on our mission to transition the world to the circular economy. We're getting a lot of challenge at the moment on EMF's view, Ellen MacArthur Foundation's view on COVID-19 and how that's going to impact the transition. And I think our view is very, very clear. Our view is that the circular economy is more relevant than ever. COVID-19 has really revealed the fragility of supply chains. I mean, interestingly, I hope Deborah will remember, we met at the HEASC conference last year, and my colleague Colin was giving a talk on what is the circular economy and why is it so important. And one of the things that he said, and this was way before COVID-19 hit, was what we are seeing is that as well as risks to the supply of raw materials themselves, i.e. the planet is running out of natural resources, the risk to supply security and safety associated with long, elaborately optimized global supply chains appears to be increasing. Now, this has been something that's been part of what we've talked about for a really long time, and we're obviously seeing this in action now. If we just take two examples, so PPE availability and food supply, it is really clear that the current system of linear procurement is stressed in a time of crisis. I mean, I don't know what your experience in the US is like, but if you try and buy a bag of flour in England, you'll really struggle. Now, interestingly, it's not the production of flour that's the issue, but the production of the packaging. Things that used to work in harmony are not. The system is broken. Again, with PPE, it's been a subject of much contention in the UK. We've seen a huge rise here in home sews making hospital scrubs as our National Health Service struggles to get sufficient supply from their usual suppliers. Again, another example of how global supply chains are broken and stressed, and actually it is smaller local supply chains that are stepping up to fill in that gap. Linear supply chains are inherently fragile. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Ilma to take us into circular procurement. Ilma.
Thank you, Rainera, and I'll jump straight in. And so in terms of what Rainera was just talking about and the concept of circular economy that is based on three core principles as we define them here at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation: designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in use, and regenerating natural systems. It sounds all nice and great, but how do we actually apply that when it comes to practicalities and when actually in your departments you need to make purchasing decisions? So how do we make these decisions more circular? So there are actually three different strands that come together in order to present what I will be sharing with you today. So the first strand is a collaborative project that Rainera was already mentioning. And in this project, so it started a couple of years ago, and one of the largest technology companies in the world, Philips, started it together with the Exeter University from the UK. And the goal of the project was to look into what are the missing competencies within business-specific functions that would enable people in these functions to transition to circular economy more effectively. So they looked into marketing and sales, into product creation and design, and procurement. And as a result of this project, one of the key findings was that it's not only about having a better understanding across all functions within businesses, but particularly for procurement, it's about the ability to engage their suppliers in different kinds of conversations, because the relationship with their suppliers in the more circular economy is changing. So as a result of that, we continued the work together with our network companies to look into how we could put together a circular procurement framework that would enable people at procurement to make their decisions, their purchasing decisions, more circular. And what we realized is that the general procurement journey is very similar across all different kinds of sectors. So may it be companies, may it be higher education institutions, or public sector institutions. And in fact, higher education institutions face similar levels of complexity just as public institutions due to high budgets, complex multi-department internal structures, and legislation that they need to abide by, which meant that the research we have already done into how the circular economy could be enabled by the policymakers and particularly by the public procurement could come in handy, and we could draw on that as well. And then from Rainera's work and various conversations that she has done with higher education institutions, we started pulling together some of the examples that we have already heard of what universities do well when it comes to thinking about procurement in a more circular way. And we also bring some public sector examples, either that comes from our own research, and these case studies are published on our case study library on our website, or from other resources that we know are good resources to use if you want to think about your procurement in a more circular way. So what I'm going to speak about and what I'm going to present to you now are 5 circular intervention points that we encourage you to think about in order to make your procurement more circular. And next slide, and we will start with the first one, which is about, yes, next, Rainera, yeah, go back, yes, perfect. So the very first question, in a way, it's common sense, and yet it's good to remember to ask that, which is, how can you reuse, repurpose the assets, the items that you already have, instead of opting to buy them? And how it fits into circular economy is quite simple. First, it increases that utilization of these items and postpones the point in time when they reach the landfill and are disposed of. And the benefit for universities is quite obvious, which is the cost saving. So the first example here that I'd like to share is the King's College London, that managed to save almost 100,000 British pounds throughout the year 2017-2018 by reusing their furniture. And in addition to that, in the previous year, they managed to save about 50,000 British pounds in procurement costs due to this process. Another small example comes from the Nottingham Trent, that used the Warp It system, which is an online furniture and equipment reuse portal, and that allowed them to realize the savings of over £10,000. And the third little example comes from the US, a Northwestern university that does a quite similar thing. So they have a so-called the Surplus Property Exchange, which is an online bulletin board where Northwestern departments can list their surplus university property, thus enabling the reuse of it. So that's the first intervention, how you can repurpose or reuse assets as they already are. The second intervention is about including circular economy criteria when you set out to actually purchase something. And this is where I would like us to go back to the butterfly diagram, which is in the next slide, and to emphasize one of the key aspects of this diagram, which is about thinking about your biological the items in biological cycle and items in the technical cycle as distinct ones. And just to remind you, the items that belong to biological cycle would be the ones that can be safely returned back to the natural system. So drawing from the work that various systemic initiatives here at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation have done, such as plastic, textiles, and food, we have used their visions for how that industry would look like in a more circular way. And we turned them into the top line questions that you could use when you think about your purchasing decisions in that area. So starting with the technical cycle, and that will be the next slide. So there are 3 questions that we encourage you to think about. So when you think about any items that you need to purchase that are made of technical materials, plastic, metal, glass, and so on and so forth, so there are 3 things we would want you to think about. So the first one is whether you can purchase items that are used more. And this is about increasing the utilization rate of the item. And here you can consider things such as, can you purchase items in such items that could be perhaps shared between different departments? Can you purchase items that can be repaired and come with a repair manual? Or can you purchase items that can be reused and redistributed later on? And the example we have here actually comes from Aussie. So the Aussie provides a reusable food container systems, and they're a cost-effective alternative to single-use go-to containers. And that can work for any operational sectors across the United States. And they already partner with universities such as University of Colorado, University of Notre Dame, University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, and several others. So instead of purchasing single-use items, you're looking for items that could be used longer. Another question to consider here is, how can you purchase items that are made to be remade? So here we look at the further loops in our technical cycle diagrams. And the idea is that at the end of life, these items don't reach the landfill, or they are not incinerated. And by the way, in our framing of circular economy, if we incinerate items, we lose the inherent value of the item that was put through the energy to produce that item, through the labor used to produce that item, and all the materials that were used to produce that item. They were all essentially gone. Therefore, we don't see incineration as part of the circular economy. Instead, we want these items to be sent back for refurbishment or remanufacturing back to the supplier. And you can ask whether there is a reverse logistic in place that could do that. And we want to purchase that items that can be recycled. So at the end of life, then they can be taken apart to the smaller component parts, and then these parts can be reused, or on the material and chemical level, the smallest particles can be reused and turned into something else. And the final question here to look into is whether you can purchase items that are made of renewable and safe materials. And by renewable, we mean materials that can replenish themselves. And by safe, we mean non-hazardous, non-toxic, non-polluting. So these are the questions that we would encourage you to consider for the technical cycle items. When it comes to biological cycles, we worked together with our food team and looked at the food vision that they have created for the circular economy and turned this vision into the questions that you can also use in order to make your food purchasing decisions more circular. So the first question is whether you can source food that is regeneratively and locally, that is sourced locally or regeneratively where appropriate, and that establishes thriving and diverse food networks more resilient to shocks. And what Renera was referencing to earlier regarding the current COVID-19 situation that really exposed how fragile our particularly food supply chain networks are. So by localizing them and making them more distributed, you could make sure that they are more resilient. And there are a couple of great examples that we have here for you. So the first one that our food team recommended to mention to you is so-called the Good Food Purchasing Program that is based here in the UK, and that transforms the way public institutions purchase food by creating transparent and equitable food system built on 5 core values. And these values are local economies, health, valued workforce, animal welfare, and environmental sustainability. And the Good Food Purchasing Program provides a metric-based and flexible framework that encourages large institutions to direct their purchasing power towards these 5 values. Another example we have here is so-called Hive Cafe at Roehampton University in the UK. And Hive Cafe is a student-run cafe, and they insource their food produce rather than outsource it. And here I'm also going to mention the third question, which is about promoting diverse and seasonal ingredients. And this question is about design, actually, and it's bringing the design thinking into your food purchasing, because it is by design that we create the menus or recipes that various food items become part of. And if we were able to choose more diverse and seasonal ingredients coming from the local networks, that actually may make these networks more resilient and also contribute to the health factor of your communities. And going back to the example of Hive Cafe, so in that particular cafe, they only served seasonal produce and plant-based produce. And as I said, that was a student-run initiative within the university, which be a great little example, a great little pilot project you can do. Another example here in terms of promoting food diversity and seasonality comes from Slow Food Network, and particularly in Africa, this network has established a Slow Food Foundation for Biodiversity, the goal of which is to create 10,000 food gardens within local communities and schools, with an aim to encourage these communities to learn more about the food, to learn more about the food diversity, and also have a better access to healthy, fresh produce. And you could think about the White House vegetable garden that has similar aims as a little project. And finally, going to the middle question, so the second question, can you purchase food items, the byproducts of which become valuable inputs to the wider economy? And this may require a little bit of creative thinking, and perhaps the best way to think about it is through the example of coffee. And to be honest, I'm not sure what kind of coffee is more popular in the US, whether it is a filtered coffee or the ground coffee, which perhaps it's more common here in the UK. But if you drink ground coffee, so you have coffee grounds, and and very often it's considered waste and it's just disposed of. But actually these coffee grounds could become active and functional ingredients for cosmetics, nutraceuticals, and other functional foods. And there is a company, I believe in Denmark called Café Bueno, that partners with various institutions to collect these coffee grounds and turn them into something else. So this is again what Renera was referencing to. In nature, which is what circular economy gets its inspiration from, there is no waste. Everything becomes food to something else. And next slide, please. So the third circular intervention that we would encourage you to think about is about circular procurement policies and how you could have them embedded at the highest possible level within the university. So here the example that we have comes from the City of Toronto that has established a cross-divisional circular economy working group. So City of Toronto has the annual purchasing power that amounts to almost 2 billion Canadian dollars in value. So that's a really significant purchasing power that can be used strategically to drive market innovation. So back in 2016, the City Council approved the long-term waste management strategy and formed a cross-divisional circular economy working group to apply circular economy principles to the city's procurement processes. And as a result of that, since its inception, the project has launched a pilot phase and started to identify what the existing circular procurement activities are. And they started to integrate new circular economy requirements within all call documents or specification documents. And they were only able to do that because the circular economy thinking was driven from the highest level. And I guess it's a bit similar what we see within the organization. If you have the circular economy as part of the strategy that is endorsed by the top management, then it's much easier for people much lower on the structural scale, let's say working tactically in procurement as category managers, to have more freedom to shift away from price-based and value-based or quality-based criteria towards more circular criteria. So this was the third intervention. So the fourth intervention, so the fourth intervention is about establishing a research test bed. And again, Renero is referencing that one of the areas where we look into potential circular economy initiatives within universities is research. And there are some great examples how universities themselves could start thinking about circular economy and how start acting in more circular ways by utilizing their research capabilities. And take MIT, for example. So MIT itself is like a small, densely populated city with a population of 25,000 people. So their Office of Sustainability took a strategic look at the substantial amounts of materials that flow through the institute, and they wanted to identify the vital connection between the resources that they purchase and those that they discard. So at the beginning of 2016, or actually at the beginning of the fall in 2016, they started a partnership within MIT together with one of their PhD students and together with relevant operational departments in order to find ways to promote circular material flows that would leverage their purchasing power to support product suppliers and manufacturers who are using recycled materials as inputs and redirect their outputs towards other processes. So that's the example of research testbed that you could perhaps establish within your university. And moving on to the fifth intervention point, it's about new business models. And again, this is going back to light and Philips and light bulb. What if instead of purchasing light bulbs, you could purchase light? Or instead of purchasing air conditioning, you could purchase cold air? Or instead of purchasing the floor tiles, you could purchase the maintenance and servicing of your floor. And this is what a public institution in Netherlands has done, called ProRail. So it's a Dutch government task organization that wanted to refurbish one of their offices, and they had an objective to consume less energy by doing that and reduce their CO2 emissions. So they included some sustainability and circular economy criteria in the tender, and they ended up purchasing circular cradle-to-cradle certified office furniture, but also they signed a 10-year service and maintenance contract for flooring together with Desso, a flooring company. So Desso used for flooring the tiles that could be reused or recycled, and the quality of the floor was continuously monitored. And compared to traditional, not fully reusable tiles, This provided great environmental and monetary gains because of the longer life of these tiles. So that is the fifth intervention point and another example that I had to share with you. And just to wrap it all together in the next slide, so you can see the very basic procurement journey that any institution or organization would undertake. So it all starts with identifying your needs, and then you have to prepare specifications. Then you go to the marketing and start engaging and perhaps long listing your suppliers. And then you receive proposals from them, which get evaluated, and then you select your suppliers, sign the contract, and then it's about managing the contract and your relationship with that particular supplier. So these 5 circular intervention points that we have outlined in the presentation today, so they fall basically in the first 2 steps, so either within identify your needs or preparing specifications. So when you start thinking about your purchasing needs, so maybe from the top level, the first thing that you could do is think about how to implement circular procurement policy that would inform all your procurement decisions going forward. Then the very first question to ask is whether you need to buy at all and whether there's something that you could reuse or repurpose. And also thinking out of the box, whether you could think about research test bed that you could establish within your university. And then when you do decide to buy, a couple of things that you could think about. So one is how you could embed the circular economy criteria. And this can be based on those 3 top level questions for the technical cycle and biological cycle. And then how you could move to new business models that is all about having access rather than ownership of the things that you would normally buy. So think about light bulbs versus light. So that is it really what we had to share with you today. And perhaps the last thing to say that, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're just starting to collect the case studies, and we know some great examples, but we haven't turned into the case studies. We haven't included them into our public case study library yet. And yet this is the step that we would like to take going forward. So if there are any great examples that you have within your institutions in terms of how you bring circular economy thinking into your procurement practices, we would love to hear from you. And perhaps just to wrap up, if there were a few things we would like you to remember. So I would say the first one is that circular economy is based on 3 principles, which is designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in use, and regenerating natural systems. The second one is think about the butterfly diagram, which represents how circular economy could look within the system. And that's mainly about thinking about biological cycle items and technical cycle items separately. And finally, that circular economy provides a great opportunity, especially right now, to rethink how we can do things going forward and rebuild better. And procurement gives you a great leverage power to then allow the circular economy thinking to ripple down your supply chains. So that would be all from me and Rainera. Thank you. Daita, back to you, or perhaps Deborah, back to you.
Thank you. I think we're actually going to Van right now. So Van. One more button. You need to click the mic button. You're still on mute. Yep, there you go.
It's so complicated. Between Zoom, GoToMeeting, and all the other things we're doing, it's certainly a new world for all of us. I have clicked on a button that says I'm not a robot about 15,000 times in the last month. I could assure everybody I'm not a robot, although that sort of sounds like fun, frankly. So I'm Van Sullivan. I work at Stony Brook University. I'm the executive director of the Auxiliary Corporation. I'm just going to buzz through. I've got a bunch of slides here. I'm going to buzz through a bunch of them really quickly. I'm going to talk a bit about some stuff we've done here at Stony Brook, and I'm going to talk about some of our sort of strategy and tactics and how to accomplish things, and hopefully provide a small slice. It's pretty amazing listening to Ilma, Rainera, and Deb speak about the sort of broader spectrum. We are certainly a piece of the pie at the university, but we have been able to accomplish some things rather quickly here, and I was hoping to talk about them a little bit. Stony Brook is basically probably the largest school you've never heard of. We have 10,000 students and residents on our campus in Eastern Suffolk County. We're a member of the 64 school SUNY system. We are one of the top public research universities in the nation. And there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in addition to our, we're up to 27,000 undergraduate and graduate students on campus. We manage Brookhaven National Laboratory. We have a campus out in Southampton, a very well-known marine and atmospheric sciences school, a very heavy STEM focus at the university as well. We also manage a 600-bed hospital, which is here on campus across the street. There are 3 small medical centers as well, and Brookhaven Lab, and we have the Renaissance Medical School that's based at our teaching Stony Brook Hospital. All of this falls under, is supported by our auxiliary corporation. As with all auxiliaries, about 80% of our volume does go through dining services. We are a hybrid campus, and it's I'm really excited to be able to sort of share that because we manage a contract partnership on one side of the campus, and then we self-operate all of the food service at our medical facilities, and so we can sort of speak to both sides of that coin. Both have a lot of positives, frankly. For folks who aren't in the CNU world, auxiliary services is a very wonky name for folks who do business services on campus. We're called the Faculty Student Association, which makes it even weirder. What we do in many schools, it's part of the university. In the SUNY system, we're a separately incorporated 501c3 affiliate of the university. We have a contract with the state university system, but we operate under the direction of a board of directors from the campus and from the medical center, and then we're authorized to provide various services to the campus. Auxiliaries, as I said, almost always have food service, but they do a whole bunch of other stuff: vending, laundry, pouring rights, parking, mail, printing, and we do a lot of those services here too. We provide accounting services to different groups. We provide agency services and contract negotiations, course materials, books, etc. And these are all the kind of things that, depending on the school you're at, do run through there. What I'm going to be talking about today is mostly dining. This is some stuff we do here on our campus. 30,000 meals is a lot. I worked at UMass Amherst for many years where it was 55,000 meals, so maybe it's not that much. But we do have a fairly large organization with a pretty big pen when it comes to purchasing here, especially out on the east end of Long Island. Okay, so COVID happened. I had to dust this guy off and go through it a little bit this morning because, frankly, things changed. They changed a lot in the last 12 weeks. I added a slide at the end that we'll chat through a little bit. I'm gonna just buzz through some of the sustainability stuff we do here at Stony Brook. We've won some awards in the last year. I've been here about a year and a half. We recycled our involvement in Recyclemania. Had a conversation with the folks in waste management, said, there's this thing, Recyclemania, we should do it. And the guy literally broke down. He's the most amazing, wonderful gentleman, Mike Udelman. It turns out he was actually one of the founders of Recyclemania, and the campus has sort of steered away from it, and we were able to get that going back on campus. And I do a lot of work with e-waste, and I'm so really deeply grateful to have such a good partner here on campus in our waste management department. Stony Brook University is one of the top 3 schools in the nation for social mobility. We move an amazing amount of folks from the 4th and 5th socioeconomic stratus to the 1st and 2nd. And it's almost stunning with the ability with which we have to do that. And a lot of that really shows in a lot of the equity elements of our sustainable practices. And we're very well known for that, as you can see. So I'm going to jump right into one of the big things that I did want to discuss today. We weren't doing a very good job of this. And we, in the last year, got rid of all the plastics in dining and converted over to compostable containers. We launched a reusable container program. We got rid of plastic straws completely, and we switched to reusable bags in all the stores. And that was just, we're going to do it, and we did it. And we found some ways to do it that I'm going to get to at the end. We were very active, and I'm very proud of that local government that was fully supportive. And actually, a lot of these things are happening in New York anyway. We have a lot of initiatives. We have a freight farm on campus. We do composting. So we do have the reusable containers. We have gardens. We also have gardens over at the hospital. That food gets served on campus, and that food does get served to patients in the hospital rooms. And that's, again, something that we were able to get going in the last year. And we're working with some vendor partners. I'm a big fan of Farmer's Fridge. Our students love it as well. And there's some really good messaging and I think opportunities for messaging as you go through this stuff. These students live 20 miles east of here, or west of here, and I had absolutely no idea that there were farms 20 miles east of here. And we have this mission and opportunity here on sort of the border of a larger urban area to really communicate the message of where food comes from. And a lot of what Ilma was talking about in our procurement practices there's some easy wins at universities and sort of just directing folks to where food comes from. And I've been involved with a lot of those various programs. So we had a really successful group of farm tours this past summer as well. And also working with some sustainably backed roasters who are local to us in 30 miles the other direction in Brooklyn. We're members of the Food Recovery Network. The young lady with the hair there in the middle, I went to a meeting of a bunch of students. I couldn't get anybody to do it. I said, I'm not leaving until somebody volunteers to start a Food Recovery Network chapter. And bam, Sasha did it. And there we are. We were able to move, I think, 700 pounds of food over pre-COVID just in the month of February. We're continuing to, it's unfortunate that it's extra food, but it's been great to get it to folks in need. And we are starting to work much more closely with some national sustainable seafood groups and local groups as well. And we launched a farm share program on campus in conjunction with the campus for folks that are able to access local produce out here in a remarkably suburban area that still has a great deal of farms around, but those dots weren't necessarily being connected. So if that idiot on the screen can do it, you can do it. And that's my message here today. How? I'm going to skip down a little bit to the middle of this screen. Auxiliary services are ubiquitous. If you are in this service providing area or in dining services, you are everywhere on campus and you have a conversation narrative with pretty much every group on campus. It is possible, and it's almost like it's our duty to leverage that conversation into a sustainable conversation. The bridges are there. We cater you. We do your laundry. We park you. We print you. We mail you. We do all of those things. So it's really just a matter of co-opting that communication narrative to then take these best practices and to build those constituency partnerships on campus to get this stuff accomplished. And it's something that can be done simply by the ubiquity of our groups. And the second part, and I'm glad my finance director's in here because she's gonna freak out, but it's just math, right? It's a budget. Things cost money, you figure it out. And a lot of times you can save some money too. Really briefly, at the last school I was at, we were actually able to determine that all of the labor that was going into these very, very nice but expensive disposable clamshell containers was being quadrupled because when those things go in the trash, they take up these huge trash bags and we're paying people to dump air. So when we made a switch there over to looking at using warewashing and plates, in addition to the cost savings of the product, there are actually some big cost savings of labor too. So when you take a deep dive, you can find a lot of times some cost offsets, or we go through these sort of annual pricing periods, and it's a matter of just sort of absorbing some of these costs into that and taking a look at it. But there is no budget that can't have better practices worked into it. It's just a matter of doing it. And the benefits to it are fairly massive. There are some upstream considerations certainly about where the trash is going to go or where these products are going to be recycled, et cetera. And then with our contract partners, and I'm running slow on time, so I'm going to move quickly. When you have a contract partner, you have access to a massive national network of information. Use it. When you're in a self-op, you have access to your university's procurement practices. Use it. Some stuff we're doing quickly because of COVID, right? We've had some things on the table that I'm going to have to take off the table. I had 2 locations that had to-go containers. We switched the to-go containers over to compostable ones, but the real idea is to reduce them completely because it's still trash, just better trash. We were going to install warewashing. I simply can't do that this semester, but it doesn't mean we're not going to do it. We're still going to do it. Similarly, program 1 a day at our dine-in, we were going to switch those to mandatory reusable containers. That's just going to get deferred to spring. But there's no reason why things have to be permanently derailed. And I did want to point out that there are a lot of opportunities because of COVID that are really going to help us out a bit. We're going to have a lot more contact and a lot more conversation with folks. We're going to have a lot more use of disposables. Disposables are going to become a conversation, especially when there's big piles of trash that folks haven't seen. And hopefully that can be parlayed into positive conversations. Cost is an issue. So looking for ways to offset costs is going to be even more hard to look at. As part of the campus narrative, dining is going to be one of the few things that's still going on campuses this fall. So it's a good chance to also jump in. And then there's some good, hearty conversations. And I'm going to end with this. We switched immediately. We had about 2,000 students who stayed on campus during the first round of COVID this spring. We were very focused on you can't touch anything and it's all going to be plastic. And so we put out these bowls of plastic ketchup. Then I'm watching students like dig through it. Well, that's like the dumbest thing we ever did. But we can't have pumps because nobody can touch it. And so what do? The person behind the counter says, would you like ketchup? And we put the ketchup on it. There's a solution for all of this. It doesn't have to be draconian. A lot of times it actually improves service and lowers costs. And I'm here to tell you that it can be done. Everything I just said we accomplished in 17 months. And I would love to help anybody who has any questions with things we may be able to do. This is not a zero-sum game. There is no perfection. And once you can get over the idea that no matter what you do in sustainability, it's not going to be good enough because you keep moving forward, it's awesome. Because at that point, you can then basically say, okay, I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm just going to keep moving forward. That's the approach we're taking, and it's working for us. So that's it from me. Thank you, everybody, for attending this webinar.
Mute button.
Mute button, sorry. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I'm really excited to be presenting along with Ellen MacArthur Foundation and Van from Stony Brook. I'm here today to share a bit about our specific focus at the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council, which, as our name would lead you to believe, is very focused on the power of procurement. So we are a nonprofit organization. We're membership based. We have over 175 member institutions. We have about 30 higher education institutions as members of the SPLC, a few of which are featured on this slide. And our purchaser members represent over $300 billion of spend each year. So our organization was formed with the idea of forming a sustainable purchasing community that could leverage the power of the dollar to drive market transformation to a more sustainable economy. So a lot of what we're talking about here today is in terms of circular economy and circular procurement. But when I was thinking about what I would share with you today, I realized that really sustainable purchasing is very much related to the circular economy as a whole. I'll show you a little bit later some of the resources that we have to offer to our membership community, but I'm very excited to talk with you a bit about why we believe procurement is so critical for sustainability in general. So if you're working on sustainability goals, you can't ignore procurement. And then I'll share a bit about how our organization supports the sustainable purchasing community with a specific lens on higher education and circular procurement. So what is it about procurement that makes it so powerful? On the screen here, I'm sharing a snapshot from a report conducted by the West Coast Climate Forum that looked at the greenhouse gas emissions from 3 types of organizations. So they gathered data from public agencies, that's in the blue bars, higher education institutions in the red, and utility providers in green. And as you can see on the far right-hand side of the screen, Scope 3 emissions, specifically supply chain greenhouse gas emissions, are greater than Scope 1 and 2 emissions for both public agencies and higher education institutions. And if you take all of the Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions, they tend to dwarf the Scope 1 or Scope 2 emissions that have been a particular focus for a lot of organizations pursuing sustainability improvements. So what we've seen over the last several years is a big increase in interest in using procurement to drive the sustainability changes that organizations want to see. And I'm really excited about that change in focus. And it isn't just for greenhouse gas emissions. We've talked quite a bit today about a variety of impacts that our procurement can have on environment, society, and economy. And really this trend of procurement and supply chain being a driver of these impacts is not just specific to greenhouse gas emissions, it's specific to a whole host of other impacts. So if you're looking for sustainability improvements, procurement is a great area to focus on. And I wanted to take a moment to mention, I think when a lot of folks think about sustainability or sustainable purchasing, we're thinking about things such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions or zero waste initiatives. But it's important to note that sustainability is not just environmental in nature. We need to think about the societal and economic impacts as well. And there are a whole host of ways that purchasing can support a positive environment and a positive society and a positive economy through a focus on diversity and inclusion and local jobs, through human rights improvements. And all of these are really integral, especially thinking about today as we see that the environmental crises that we faced are intertwined with societal issues like inequity and supply chains falling apart because they're not resilient. So I just wanted to highlight that at the SPLC, we look at, of course, the environmental impacts of our procurement, but we have a similar focus on the societal and economic impacts. Now I'd like to switch to sharing a bit about our organization, the way we work with our member community, and I'll mention specifically some of the ways that we've had success working with higher education institutions. So again, the other presenters have mentioned how important our work is today, more important now than ever. One reason being that we've seen how important resiliency is as supply chains erode and degrade and reveal themselves to be truly unsustainable. So you all on this call and your colleagues need to continue to do the work that you're doing, but I'm sure you're facing many challenges and a lot of competing priorities. And so the resources I'm going to show you now are available to our members in a virtual setting, and that's been always unique about our organization, but I think very useful now that we're all sheltering in place and perhaps not convening in the ways we used to. So the first way I'd like to show you that we support our members is with product and service guidance. So I really appreciated the steps and the interventions that Ilma presented because they're quite familiar to me in the work that we do at the SPLC. So we have guidance for products and services in over 20 categories. And these, the circular economy principles, such as making sure that a product has a longer lifespan or the life cycle can be extended, or reducing the use of toxic chemicals, improving reuse. Those are all features of the guidance that we provide. And I know we're running short on time, but I do want to jump to this category landing page just to show you a quick shot of what this resource looks like. So again, we have guidance for about 20 categories that starts with some executive summaries, summarizing the key strategies and benefits of improving your footprint in these different areas. We have guidance collected from a variety of organizations, public sector, private sector, NGO. We have a big case study library for each specific category, recorded webinars, places for our members to communicate with one another about specific topics, specific contract language for each category. We have a listing of the resources and organizations and relevant certifications. And then finally, some tools you can use to further your progress towards your goals. So that is one way we support our members. A second way is through community collaborations. One way we've been engaging our members is through action teams. So if a member comes to us and says, I really need guidance on how to improve my purchasing in this area, and I'm not finding it anywhere, we convene a team that meets for maybe a 6-month period to gather together the best available information on that topic to produce a guidance document that can then be used by the sustainable purchasing community. So most recently, we worked with the Center for Environmental Health on a sustainable food serviceware guidance document that is available on our public-facing website. So if you're looking for ways to reduce the impact of your food serviceware, that's a document that came out of our action team approach. We have peer learning circles right now that are in pilot test mode, but we have one focused on higher ed. And this is a group of about 6 individuals who might typically work alone or maybe with a very small team and can use the support and accountability of peers in other organizations. They meet once a month for an hour in a very structured environment so that the group feels like they're getting work done in that meeting, and they provide each other support on the different opportunities and challenges they're facing. And then finally, the topical learning circles is a new addition to the SPLC offerings. These are kind of a blend of the first 2 opportunities that I mentioned, and though that group is focused on a specific topic. So we're starting one on circular procurement, and that group will begin meeting in the end of June, and will be focused on helping each other develop and implement a circular economy project. So very much on getting work done together and collaborating together, leveraging the knowledge and expertise of the community. Finally, I know we are running short on time, but I do want to mention a third way that we support our members, because I know it's quite powerful when you're getting a project started or a program started, is to think about it through a strategic process. We are big supporters of developing strategic sustainable purchasing programs because we know those are the ones that are most efficient and most impactful, which is obviously very important right now as we're in a time of limited resources and bandwidth. So this is a coaching process for our members. We have a 4-workshop series that starts with inventorying your organizational goals and priorities, develops a bold 5-year vision, and then puts some more structure around the program, development of goals and metrics that are strategic in nature, and then finally, a focus on strategy development that can support the accomplishment of those goals. And the end product is a strategic program plan. So you leave that process with a plan to implement over the year, and then we're able to check in with our members more meaningfully throughout the year to keep them moving on their goals. We've worked with higher education institutions as well as all of our other member types, but have had some really great outcomes with our higher education members. The University of Colorado was developing a new program and noted how important SP3 was to develop the structure and the direction they needed for their new program, and also participating in the peer learning circles to allow them to connect with other staff in similar organizations and gain access to resources that they otherwise wouldn't have. So this has been a really positive relationship, working not just with the University of Colorado, but all of our higher ed organizations. I think higher ed institutions are uniquely positioned to accelerate progress in sustainable purchasing because they have that campus environment to accelerate the innovation piece, and that is, I think, really key. Really quickly, I did just want to mention that right now we have a CEO that started in January, so we're finalizing a new membership model and pricing. But for the time being, we thought it was important to make membership available to organizations that probably don't have the budget to pay for a whole year of membership. So we do have a monthly payment plan option. We have an option for a prorated membership for the balance of 2020. And we are very interested in exploring discounts for academic institutions that are interested in doing some sort of project that would kind of benefit our organization and the institution. So if any of these things are interesting to you, you can certainly reach out to me. I also put our Director of Membership Sales contact info on here and our membership page as well. And finally, we have another virtual event available in July. This is a buyer-supplier matchmaking event, building on the success of our virtual summit last week. Check that out. It's the Virtual Connect, and it's a really fun event. Allows you to have one-on-one meetings with suppliers, and then also some roundtable focused conversations on relevant sustainable purchasing initiatives. With that, I think I will be handing over to Daita for question and answers.
Thank you so much to all of our presenters and to all of our attendees. We do have a couple of minutes for questions, so I will go right to them. The first question I will ask to all of our presenters, and perhaps we will go in the order that you presented, but in your particular view, from your own perspective, what is the single biggest challenge to moving higher education institutions deeper into a circular economy model? What is likely to be the real stumbling block to progress? Deb, do you want to go first, or we'll go to Rhaenyra?
You know, my answer is very simple, which is I'm glad you want to know about the biggest stumbling block, but yesterday morning I had a call with campuses around the world through a UNEP monthly call that I run in Greening Your Campus and the surrounding community. And anytime we talk about challenges, we also talk about solutions. So I'm not sure I'm even a fan of this question, because why would you list the challenges without also talking about solutions at the same time?
Well, I'm happy to talk about a solution, Deborah. I think one of the biggest challenges that we see is a kind of fundamental lack of understanding of what the circular economy is in its fundamental principles, and that's understanding at all levels of all organizations, getting students taught, getting school children taught, and really embedding those key principles in people's knowledge and understanding. So I guess my solution to that, Deborah, is let's teach more, let's engage more, let's push our employees to understand more about the circular economy. So that's my two pennies in there.
I could jump in just real quick on this too. I think, from a purely operational standpoint, it's important to remember, that at a university setting specifically, the main reason folks are here is to get folks educated, to do research and this sort of academic mission. All of the rest of it, whether it's procurement, providing services, or sort of how we go about our daily lives, is in support of that. And so it's important to build those communication sort of bridges and work with the different folks to get folks to understand that doing that main mission better is part of making the main mission better, right? As opposed to saying you have to do this and you have to do that. There are so many moving parts of the university. It's just really easy for the better things to just shake out. It's cyclical. This is 15-week crazy sleigh ride, and then it's over, and then 15 more weeks, and then it's over. And nothing ever happens if you don't sort of grab it at the right time and get the right folks at the table. It's very easy to go through an entire career at university without really moving certain bars forward, and it happens quickly. So acknowledging that, I think, is a big piece of making it happen.
I'd add to that, sort of building on that, that I think universities are so large and have a lot going on, and so finding a way to bring those initiatives together and recognize that they're not competing priorities necessarily, that they're building the organization in the direction that it needs to be going in. So that is why we advocate for a more strategic approach and thinking about things more holistically rather than in silos.
Thank you. And there is a question that is a follow-up on what Rhaenyra said about education and also Ven, but we have one of our attendees who are teaching and training starter consultants on supporting organizations on their way to sustainability. And they're not working just in the US, but also in Europe and Asia, and they're lacking reliable and experienced consultants. where they're working. So they're wondering if there's any curriculum out there or courses that also include practical work to get these consultants more experience, I guess, with more knowledge in the circular economy.
Do you want me to kind of come back on that? And then I might ask Ilma in a second to actually talk a little bit more about our From Linear to Circular program, which we've been running. So I think we're seeing across the board a lack of skills, whether it's in higher education, whether it's in industry, but there are a lot of organizations out there that are providing free online courses. So TU Delft, for example, has a massive open online course in circular economy. They also have, I think they have 4, actually. They have a basic one in circular economy, one in circular design, and various other ones that I can't remember off the top of my head. And in fact, there are a number of universities. So McMaster University in Toronto, just outside Toronto, kicked off last year with a 3-day face-to-face intensive circular economy program for professionals, which they hope to run on an annual basis. Exeter in the UK runs some great professional learning programs. I know that we are working with a number of different organizations to also translate some of those massive open online courses into languages such as Portuguese and Spanish. So I think there are loads of different opportunities for learning. Our website itself is a wealth of information on the circular economy and lots of case studies on how to apply it. But I'll ask Ilma to talk a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing through our From Linear to Circular program and how we've been supporting professionals in understanding their knowledge.
Yes, so the first thing I'd like to say that generally at the foundation, we want to scale the understanding of the circular economy, and therefore we have efforts focused on the Learning Hub and providing various learning paths in circular economy on our website. And in addition to that, we also started the program called From Linear to Circular in order to build the network of circular economy pioneers in various regions. And due to the current situation, we have moved this program online, which has proven highly successful. We're actually running now 5 different webinar series for different cohorts, different groups. One of them is open to all, where anyone can join. And I think the idea is that afterwards we will make all these webinars available for public watching online. And I really think that we will be repeating them in some shape or form going forward. So that could be something that your entire that you're part of your staff or part of or group, even the entire groups of your students could sign up for and do it together. And it takes you through the series of topics, starting from the very basic circular economy understanding and then going deeper and deeper, and also in various topics in relation to circular economy that builds on the work that we have done at the foundation, together with the challenges that you need to think about, and together with a group learning and learning tree or so to bring into the reflective learning. And then by the end of it, you are a much better circular economy practitioner. And that's the goal of it. So that's my answer to this question. And maybe very quickly, I could just mention what I meant about insourcing. So in this case, by insourcing, I meant when you don't go and buy, in this case, food, the example that I used from outside, but actually have initiatives within your university where you grow your own food and then you get it and use it for your own needs.
Thank you, Ilma, for also answering that question. Joanna, did you want to add anything on the education piece, or should we go to the next questions?
It's okay to go on to the next question. Sure.
Well, let me just add something, okay? You asked what the biggest obstacle is. I think the biggest obstacle is people not willing to become champions for this. You're going to walk around the house and practice how you're going to say things in a meeting about the importance of the circular economy. You got to practice it on your friends. You got to share it with other people at the campus and say, how do I make this clear, so that you can bring together people and make your meetings fun, for goodness sakes, and make the outcomes exciting, so that it becomes, yeah, this is something I want to be a part of. And go and invite people, even if they don't come, invite them again and invite them again, so that you get those people participating and you can start to shift the system. We have that initiative about putting sustainability into the job descriptions and performance appraisals. Let's break it down. Let's put a knowledge of building a circular economy on the campus and in the surrounding community, part of job descriptions and in performance appraisals. Because otherwise, this is just left up to those who are passionate. We need it to be standard to have a sustainable future. So I would just say that. And also, the learning materials, there's so many at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and your stuff is just available, right? So people can go and use it. Yeah. And take Van up on calling him too. He'll help you.
So Van, I actually have a couple of questions for you, but how has COVID-19 impacted your plastic waste reduction initiatives? And also, can you tell us a little bit about your external partners who are supporting your circular economy efforts? And there's two questions, I think, about your compostable containers.
So yeah, it was a gut punch. I mean, we were on a roll. We had all of this stuff going. Our first phase was sort of get rid of the plastics. Suffolk County out here on Long Island, in New York State, have also been very active in the past few months. So it's made it very easy for us to leverage some of these conversations. We built the bridge. We talked to our student body. We talked to our constituency. We built up a narrative around it, and we went ahead and made the switch, right? All of a sudden, it's like everything has to be quadruple wrapped in plastic, and we're all gonna it was a couple of tough weeks in terms of what happens, and we did end up using some plastics and disposables initially. Now that we've wended our way out of this sort of really scary time of COVID, we're going back and just stretching out the plan, which phase 2 was to put warewashing in facilities that didn't have it, to look at vending and to look at like plastic bottle use and vending, and then to get a new catering policy written so that we could reduce stuff. If that stuff wasn't going to happen in September like it was supposed to, then it'll happen next March. And that's sort of the approach that we're taking. I'm not backing down on any of this. I did have to delay some of it. We have on our East Campus, we self-op at our hospital, and there is a different level of compostability and waste and hot waste. And there's some requirements at hospitals that are nobody's figured out yet. On our West Campus, where we do have a contract partner, they're a division of Compass, we're able to tap into a lot of the stuff that Compass does, and all of the big folks are doing this. I don't want to single them out in particular. The division that we work with embraced this fully, and I'm very happy to say that by working directly with their leadership and helping them to understand that this tells their story better, to what Deb was saying. If you can tell the story of your auxiliary, tell the story of your dining program, and that tells the story of the university better, and it tells the story of your contract partner better, they're all in. It's an easy win at that point. And that's really the deal. Build the narrative, tell the story, and explain how this makes everything better. The rest works itself out. But yeah, we had to delay some stuff. There's no doubt about it. And it was really wicked scary for a while there, and we wrapped everything in plastic and then stopped doing that.
So I think the next question is about how businesses make profits with planned obsolescence, right?
Yes, so we will go to this as our last question. So planned obsolescence was invented to increase profits. So what steps can we encourage businesses to take to go into the circular economy model, and what strategies can be employed? So we'll go back to Ranira, I think.
So I can answer that question. So first of all, regarding moving from light bulbs to selling light. So this is about rethinking the ownership of products and moving to just having access of the products. And it is very generalizable, and there are many examples that we already have in our case study library, and you can use it for air conditioning services, you can use it for renting clothes, you can use it for renting modular headphones instead of buying the headphones. So there's a variety of examples already out there. In terms of other strategies, so this is about what are the new business models and what are different value creation opportunities within the circular economy. And just to say that there are different frameworks out there. I wouldn't say there is right or wrong answer, and a lot of them overlap. And you can check out the OECD resource on circular economy business models, which I think is based on Accenture research. And we have our own framework that is called Resolve Framework that also provides different strategies that businesses can employ to create value in circular economy.
Can I add just a couple more things? One thing we advocate for at our organization is to not over specify. So to ask your suppliers to meet a need rather than to provide a specific product. And that's a really hard nut to crack when you've bid for the same exact product for 25 years, it's hard to kind of change the way you think about procurement. But to not over-specify and ask the supplier to just meet your need can really help the innovation and to allow that supplier to be more creative with how they provide you with that product or service. And then secondly, I think making sure you're leveraging collective purchasing power. HEASC, HE, such a great community, SPLC community. It's a large group of purchasers who spend a lot of money on a lot of the same things. And so if you want to see a change from that linear model to a circular model, you can ask for that. It just helps to work together on those asks rather than kind of trying to pave our own paths.
Thank you so much. We are at time. We're actually over time, but I want to thank our presenters, especially Ranira and Ilma, for staying up so late, and all of our attendees for joining us today and you know, being interested in this very important topic. And I hope you'll join us again for other HEASC or HE events. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.